And honestly, I was watching him going, I want a golem. I mean, when this comes time again, right now it's wintertime, but when it comes time to cut grass again, I don't really like doing it. So it would be awesome to have a golem. Just have him go cut the grass, and then I would remove the amulet off his chest and put him in the garage.
Or you could literally push him along the floor and he'd be the grass. He'd eat the grass. Just push him along the floor.
Cinematic fantastic.
Atu, Barada, Nikto.
I'll show you who I am and what I am.
By a werewolf and lives, becomes a werewolf himself.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to the Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Weatherford.
And your other host, William Weatherford.
Get ready for opinions, dad jokes,
and bad jokes
as we watch and review sci-fi and fantasy films from the classics of yesteryear to the new favorites of today.
Today we are going to be talking about a very special person. Everyone knows about him. He's the ultimate. Everyone knows about him. Everyone fears him. He's ultimate, absolutely wonderful haircut. He's got big old chest with a star amulet on it.
I think you're mistaken.
Everyone knows who this guy is.
I don't think everybody knows who this guy is.
Is the Golem.
Oh, that's great. He was great in Lord of the Rings, and it was really interesting to hear about his past. Oh, that's... Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Gollum.
But right now, we're hearing about his past now.
That's Gollum, not Golem. So, guys, don't pronounce it like Gollum. It's Golem.
Yeah.
So, what's the name of the movie?
This is The Golem, How He Came into the World.
Are you going to try to pronounce it in German, or you want me to try it?
Sure.
Der Golem, wie in die Welt kam. That's as good as it gets. Actually, we'll just call it the Golem or Der Golem. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, do you want me to go over just a little bit about this movie? Just a little bit of why anybody should even care about it or even know what it is. So, first off, the movie's called Der Golem or The Golem, and it's not even the first one in its series. It's actually a prequel to a movie called The Golem that came out in 1915. Now, but it's lost. It's been lost. If somebody finds it and gets it restored, that'll be amazing because then we'll get to see. But honestly, this is the one most people know about when they think of a silent golem movie from the early age of cinema.
So this came from... So there's two negatives. There's two versions of this movie. There's the original... Well, now there's the A version, which is closer to the original, and the B version. So they took those negatives, and they used mostly A version, a little bit of the B version, and they turned it into trying closely to follow what it is supposed to be. However, we don't have the original copy, so...
Right, so isn't it... So does that mean it's kind of a hybrid film? A lot of these silent movies are kind of hybrid films. They take a little bit from this and a little bit from that because that's all we have.
At least it exists.
Yeah, we need to just be thankful it exists, and we don't have the original because film breaks down. Unlike paper and clay and other materials, it does break down. It's used to be made of silver nitrate. They used to have silver, but the material they call it celluloid, and celluloid, I guess, comes from cellulose, which isn't that like a plant material? So, and plant, it does break down, and it will. I mean, the stuff they use now is way better in terms of...
Is metal.
Yeah. Also, they have, we do digital a lot, and they're, even when they do traditional film now, don't quote me on this, but I'll bet you that they do it in such a way that it doesn't break down like the old used to. I mean, so we have newer technology.
Yeah. So this movie is a prequel to movies that, we don't have any of them yet.
No.
Not at all. We only have the prequel.
Right. There was The Golem, which is a movie that came before this in 1915, and there was a short comedy movie called The Golem and the Dancing Girl, and that came out in 1917. The actor Paul Wegener directed the Golem movies, and he starred as the Golem. He's got a very interesting face, which we'll talk about. But he put the Golem makeup in the little short comedy in order to scare a young lady with whom he is in love. So it's kind of a goof. I guess that sounds like a goof. this movie's not a goof. It's serious, and it's got a really great story to tell.
But you gotta love that face, man.
Oh, absolutely.
His famous wide-eyed
Yes,
face.
it's very expressive, which I like that. One thing to talk about before we go into what is a golem in the first place, which we'll get into, I'm sure, probably either if you want to do it before the plot or after, it's up to you. But we could do it before the plot, so that kind of gives an idea.
Yeah.
So first off, a golem is a being in Jewish folklore created from clay. It's basically life from non-life, something that's unliving to something that's living. The main thing with the golem is, I think it comes from a Jewish word meaning something about clay or non-living clay or something like that. Don't quote me on that.
Because it's made out of clay.
Of course. Now the thing about the golem is, I don't know. The only real bit of info I used to know about the golem was from this movie, and honestly, I'll tell you, my first connection with the golem was in these books, these old books about old horror movies, and they showed a still from the golem, and I was like, "What is that?" It was almost so mysterious and creepy because that's all we had. That's all I could find. And I never saw the movie until much later. I knew a little bit about it, but thank you to, public domain and YouTube for getting it out there. By the way, it's on YouTube. You can look it up and you can see it in all its glory. I found a couple different versions, and the one I looked at was really, it's very high quality. So, I can't go into too much detail to a golem as far as the real Jewish folklore, but
we definitely know basically what it is.
And it's in D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, there's there's a bunch of different golems. Basically, a non-living creature. They would have one called a flesh golem, which was made out of cut-up parts. A non-living creature made alive. Wow, that sounds really familiar. Maybe Frankenstein's monster would kind of be a golem. Is that a little bit of a stretch?
This is where they got the idea, was the golem.
Well, I would say no, because Frankenstein, the book Frankenstein, came out in the mid 1870, really in the 1800s, so much earlier.
And of course we did that last episode, so go watch that one.
Go listen to that one.
Go watch that one, man.
Or listen to it. Right. I'm going to get you on board with how to think of this stuff. But okay, so the thing about that is that was just a little short, though. When we get into the 30s and the 40s, we're really going to see a lot more Frankenstein's monster. I'm sorry, or Frankenstein quote movies. Through the Universal series, and those are going to be what people really remember when they remember Frankenstein. But anyway, there is a connection between this movie and Frankenstein, other than the obvious, and that's photographer or cinematographer Carl Freund. He went on to work on the 1930s classic Universal horror films later. So that kind of dark, kind of very moody style that I guess he kind of got into when he was doing work in this style, which we'll talk about what that is. I guess he used that later. And I think of the Universal monster movies as kind of a successor to these kinds of early quote horror movies, but they didn't think of it as horror. They just thought of them as dark and interesting and mysterious and fantastical. They didn't really label them with horror. I think at the time that wasn't really a label.
Because after all, they didn't know of the much more spooky horror films that were going to come out later.
Right, and
that really defined the genre as something that it originally wasn't.
Well, these movies were interesting and spooky, but the word horror, I think, gets a bad rap, probably because of the movies that came later. From the late.
Yeah, probably should call those terror movies. That's a better name.
I think horror is still okay, but it's the genre.
They just make you ooh, spooky.
Yeah, exactly. But
they make you jump with fear.
A lot of them don't really make you. When I watch these, they don't make me afraid. I just watch and I watch for the acting and the cinematography and the spookiness and the makeup, and the heightened, the music and the heightened way that they film everything. The looks of fear in people's faces. It's it's all a play. I think that later, maybe in the late 60s and then 70s and 80s, it started getting more about, the gore aspects and things like that. But this was more about mood and more about, someone's eyes and how they're looking out at you. Okay. So
this is the good stuff. But let's get out of semantics. Let's go into what this movie is.
Right, okay.
The plot.
Well,
Plot.
can we plot. Can we do something first? Can we?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk. Like I said, it was directed by Paul Wegener. He plays the Golem. Cara Bose is also the co-director.
And he's German. Oh, right. This movie is German.
Yes.
We didn't say so. This is German.
But the thing,
we're mixing up today.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it is a German-made film, but when you watch it, the text is actually there's translations down at the bottom of the text that we watched, so you won't have any problem with that if you're watching it on YouTube. What I can tell you about this is, like you said, German, but it was in a particular style called German expressionism. I know that sounds like an art term. It is. This is art. So the thing.
Unfortunately, it died out. Pretty soon after that.
Let's put
around that time.
Let's put it this way. Here's what I can tell you is during the time that these films were being made, and there was a lot of different variety of films. They weren't all films that came from Germany was German expressionism type films. That's not true. But during the time that people were making films, it was a very artistic time for Germany. It was from 1918, which again was about 8 years after. 8 years after, we're talking about 8 years after the previous movies that we talked about last episode, and it was 1918 to 1933. And if you remember, after that time frame, that's when you started, from the mid to late 30s, that's when you get Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich. And that's when they would basically take a lot of the artists and people that were actually doing a lot of this stuff, they were silenced, or they brought them in and tried to make them make Nazi movies or pro-Nazi movies. But let's go back and talk about this. During the time that this was, it wasn't called this at the time, but it was called, we officially, as historians, we call it Weimar Germany. And it was, actually, I was interested to find this out. They were a constitutional republic. And I thought about it. I said, that's what America is. So they had a parliament. They had voting. They had representatives in that parliament, which ours would be Congress, but they had a parliament. So they had voting and rights and representatives and taxation, all these different things. And then
so you didn't expect that they had rights?
No. Well, what I'm saying is, I expected it to be kind of a lesser version, or like a more of a socialist kind of republic. And then here comes, Adolf Hitler. What I was talking about is it was interesting that it was like the opposite of Nazi Germany, and that it was far away from, it wasn't close to it at all. So it's very interesting that whole switch happened. And again, that's a whole nother story. But the thing that I'm trying to look at is it must have been a very interesting time to make movies in German cinema, because they were able to express themselves and really do just about anything that they wanted to do. And the thing is, I think under certain governments, you just can't express yourself creatively. You've got the heavy hand overused, with propaganda and all this nonsense, pushing down and going, well, if you make anything creative, it can't, they're going to blame you and say it says something bad about the government. But the real thing is that some of these movies and this is good because some of the movies we're going to go forward and talk about have our German expressionism or German expressionists. And some of the things that are in German expressionism are, and you haven't even seen all the other movies that we're going to go into, William, but you are going to totally agree with me on some of these things. Things like, let's say, they didn't have really good budgets, right, in the early ones, so they did it with set design. Wildly non-realistic, geometrically absurd angles along with designs painted on walls and floors to represent lights, shadows, and objects. The plots often dealt with madness, okay, insanity, yes please, betrayal, and other intellectual topics triggered by the experiences of World War One. Right?
Which nowadays we wouldn't see very much often of. This is the good stuff we're digging into.
We see a lot of
Now
movies.
go see this with your kids sometime.
Now, yeah, actually, well, let's put it this way. I don't know if this is absolutely kid friendly. I would say it's PG-13 because it does have it. I will tell you, spoiler alert, there is a scene where a guy is thrown, just straight up thrown from a building, and you don't see it. You don't see him like hit the ground. I don't think, but it's probably a dummy shot. But
Well, he does. You do see him hit.
Oh, you do?
Hit the ground.
It's a murder. It's a straight up murder.
Yeah, it's a straight up murder. He friggin' died.
Right. Okay. Yeah, he friggin' died. Two genres that came later that were influenced by expressionism were horror films and film noir. You know, like those dark movies where you've got the
they talk to themselves.
The director, the detective. He's like, it was a cold and stormy evening, and I was just coming in to my office, and there she was, this dame in a red dress, and she looked like trouble. And then she usually is, and she's hiding something.
Often is.
And there's a murder. Well, that's, all those different kind of things. Honestly, a lot of the silent movies moving into to the quote talkies or the sound movies that were, we're gonna watch one it's called Phantom of the Opera. Everybody knows about the musical, but that's from Lon Chaney. Was in that.
It's a sneak peek.
That was an early Universal Studios movie, and so that was very influenced by expressionism. Just dark, moody, interesting, psychological. All those things are interesting. There's in German expressions they use extreme distortions in expression to show an inner emotional reality rather than what was on the surface. So it's very surreal and kind of, there's nightmarish like in some of the things. So, and I think that's kind of awesome. The thing is, this is a longer movie too, which the other two movies we that were earlier, and I think that they could not really produce anything very long. So there you go. Also,
so that is the background.
A lot of the directors and cameramen, the reason why the early horror movies of the 30s and 40s have the kind of that look to it is because that when the Nazi party started gaining power, they went nope, and they just yeeted right out of Germany and came to America. So that's I think you probably already figured that out. So what I can tell you, okay, the Golem was played by Paul Wegener, and let's see who was the other. There is a character named Rabbi Lowe, and he's one of the main characters.
He's the main character.
Albert Steinruck played Rabbi Lowe. The Miriam or Mirjam or whatever her name is, that's Rabbi Lowe's daughter, and she was played by Lida Salmanova, and she was the wife of Paul Wegener, and she was in movies not that much. She doesn't have a real big list of movies that she was in. She was only really working in movies for maybe 10 years or so. Okay, and then you got Ernst Deutsch was Dr. Lowe's, Rabbi Lowe's assistant, and then the Squire Florian was Lothar Muthel. I'm trying not to mess these names up.
Of course you're gonna mess them up.
And then
it's German.
Otto Geber was the Emperor or the Kaiser. Hans Sturm was Rabbi Jehuda. And some of these other characters, they don't get as much screen time as the Golem, Rabbi Lowe, Miriam, Rabbi Lowe's assistant, and the Knight, Florian. They all get a little bit more screen time than anybody else. So
lots of unappreciated people out here.
I think they're
but we're appreciating them. They're good.
They're unappreciated by a lot of, I think, more mainstream.
Crowd person one.
Yeah, right. Hey, here's a shout out to that one extra in the background. No, there's a lot of extras. Hey, shout out to the extras that had the ceiling fall on them later in a scene. Do you remember when the ceiling was falling down
Yeah, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
We are getting ahead of ourselves just a little bit.
So before we get ahead of ourselves even further, let's go into the delicious plot
Yummy.
of this delicious movie and this delicious golem.
Okay, it's a golem stew. All right, so
His delicious hair, his good flat hair.
His hair look just okay. We'll talk about this when we get to this part, but I have a comments on his hair when we get to that point, so you can ask me what I think. All right, so I will, and there's some things in here I may come out and mention, a little bit of trivia on when we get to them, but mostly I'll let you tackle the plot, and we'll just talk about each point as we go forward.
Yeah, so we start out, and this movie is divided into chapters. I don't know how many there are. Is there like 8?
I thought there was 5.
7 or 6.
I thought it was 5.
Somewhere around there.
Right.
At least 4. That's all I got in my notes. But that's fine. So, the movie starts out with a wonderful picture. It's of a landscape that we obviously can't show here, but it's pretty cool. You can see the stars are aligning.
So why are they showing? Where is this set? This is in the Jewish ghetto, or an area where people are kept, and in medieval Prague.
Medieval Prague was probably amazing.
Probably amazing. So Prague is in Czechoslovakia, I'm believing, and so that is in Eastern Europe. Okay. So why did it show the stars at the very beginning with the silhouette of the city? Because this whole thing starts in the stars, right?
Yeah. So it's a very important plot detail that the stars are aligning here. And so, as we figure out by the title card at the very beginning where it starts out, it says in German, but translated for us here, the stars reveal to the revered Rabbi Lowe that the Jewish community is threatened by severe harm. So the stars are predicting doom, not the game, of course.
Right, not the game. But he's reading almost like astrology, because he talks about the house of Saturn and Mars and Uranus and stuff like that. He talks about these different things that are aligning to bring. It almost reminds me of like the wise men from the Bible, where they're like following a star.
Maybe, but you don't get to see very much Christianity in this, unfortunately.
Well, and the Christianity that you do see is as you'll probably realize, is very threatened by the Jews at the time. There is a part that's coming up where there's a proclamation, and there's a sheet of paper that the emperor signs, and yikes is all I can say. When you understand what this document says, it's like yikes.
Rabbi Lowe is in this scene, and he's looking up in his telescope. So this is at the top of the tower of his house. He's like a big old guy, and he's got a big old house, and it's got a tower on it. A very important tower.
I love his house, though. It's really strange.
Perfect for throwing people off of, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
No.
Then we cut to downstairs. Or fade. I don't remember.
Yeah.
So he has an assistant, and he has a daughter, of course, named Miriam.
Miriam is good, yeah.
Yeah. So they're both talking about something, probably being like, what is he seeing? Or something. Who knows? We don't have a title card for that. We don't have a title card for everything, folks. That's how life is.
Yeah.
Don't expect a title card for every circumstance.
Right.
Anyway.
You have to interpret it by people's faces and their actions.
So he comes down the stairs after seeing it and recording it in his book, his big old book that he has. Very important book, as we'll see later.
I love his book. It's very mystical.
So he comes down the stairs, and then they come to him probably being all like, what did you see? So he comes and he's like, there's disaster among the stars. We need to warn Rabbi Jehuda, which is very important.
Yeah. I think Rabbi Jehuda is like, he's kind of well known as being like a leader in the Jewish community.
And he probably was.
I mean, there's a part where the Rabbi Jehuda he says that Rabbi Lowe is the heart incarnate of the Jewish people. So he's like, they really look up to him, and they're like, he's like a wise individual. If anybody's gonna represent them and be inspirational, it's gonna be him, because as you'll see later.
So then next in the plot, they leave his house, they go to Rabbi Jehuda, and he is there, he's reading by candlelight at his table. They come over, and he tells them the news. And then, they go to the elders to pray at the temple because they have to pray about the disaster.
They're very distraught.
Very distressed.
They've got their fists, and they're
beating their chests. And they're crying out.
If you're familiar with biblical text, there's a lot of parts where they talk about beating of chests. They talk about, you put sackcloth and ashes or whatever. It's like you're basically debasing yourself, going, "This is so horrible. What shall we do?" But the very next day, though, what happens?
So the king writes a decree that we spoke of, and it's in the news that they're going to force the Jews out at full moon because of the black magic they've thought of them doing.
Not only that, they said in there, I remember they said, number one, Jews killed our Lord Jesus Christ. I'm like, not all of them. Come on. This was a common thing in medieval times, is for them to blame It was a racist thing to blame all Jews for the death of one man.
And I mean, this was a German film. Fortunately, it was probably before Hitler came, but if it was, then yes, that would be even more spooky.
That is kind of a yikes subject. But the interesting thing about this is they say that was a bad rap that they got. It said in the document that they don't participate in our Christian festivals. I was like, duh. How many Jewish people do you know that go, hey, I'm not going to go celebrate Hanukkah. I'm going to go hang out with my Christian friends and deal with Jesus and Santa Claus and reindeer and presents. I mean, maybe some, but of course they wouldn't go to their festivities. And then it said that they practice black magic.
Which of course is exaggerated.
Well, one guy does. If you were just walking by and looking into his window and going, okay, he's got magic sigils on the ground, and and there's some spooky nonsense happening. And then, spoiler alert, he's bringing a dead thing to come back to life. What would you say? I'm not saying he's doing black magic, but it's really on the edge. It's very sus, as you kids would say.
Yeah. They don't care at all about the Jews, and neither does the squire. And so the squire guy they send out over to the Jews, to Rabbi Loeb, send him the news, and he's riding on horseback all the way there. So meanwhile, Loeb is making plans for Der Golem.
Now wait, you missed one part on there that was interesting. So he goes to Jehuda, and Jehuda goes, hey, we need to go talk to Rabbi Lowe, about this.
Because he's a really great guy.
He's an inspirational figure in our community. And as they're going over to his house, Miriam sees Florian out the window, and Florian, I guess, is the hot dude to her, and which, trust me, which influences the movie a lot. So she sees him, and she's like, ooh, he's hot. I don't know.
Yeah.
Finds him handsome.
So he made his plans for the Golem. So the plan is that the Golem, he's a big old chunky dude. He's going to whatever comes of the stars disaster, he's going to protect from whatever monsters come their way, whatever Pragians come their way. He will have their backs. So he's making these plans, and he's been hiding away these plans because, of course, they're secret. If you've ever had a secret before, cool.
Yeah, but it's really difficult to keep a secret. What was that thing that we have said before? 2 men can keep a secret if one of them's dead?
Is 3 men could keep a secret if 2 are dead.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. So, and what happens, he makes the clay statue. He's doing it all by himself, though. And the statue's heavy, which we'll get into where he needs help. But Florian comes back. Okay, so and Florian's kind of arrogant, and he is attracted to Miriam, right? And did you notice that the assistant guy kind of likes Miriam too?
Yeah, so it's a love triangle. Pretty cool.
A little bit, and that does cause a problem later on in the movie.
But we're
so
always foreshadowing everything in this podcast. Of course not.
So, so Rabbi Lowe says to Florian, he goes, "Hey, does the Emperor remember that I predicted disasters for him and I did his horoscope, and I would like to have a meeting with him." So, and Florian flirts with Miriam, and then he leaves. That's when he's making the
once he
plans
told
for
the
Golem.
news, of course, we're jumping all around the place, forgetting things.
Yeah, and what happens when Florian comes back later because he brings news after talking to the Emperor? Oh, he wants Rabbi Lowe to attend the Rose Festival at the palace, and he kind of has a secret, quote, romantic moment with Miriam while the rabbi talks to the assistant. And he goes, "Hey, assistant guy, I secretly created the golem. I need your help to animate it. It's really an elaborate procedure." And that's where it really gets cool. When I liked the procedure.
Yeah, but of course we definitely know that they both love each other to the ultimateness, that they will literally go and hug each other for however long it takes to carry a golem. Like,
right, exactly.
go test it out. Go find a golem. Go carry it around for a couple seconds. See how long it takes.
Yeah, you go find a golem. If you think a golem is so it's not a big deal. Wait till you have to pick one up. So, but the thing is, though, I think you're wrong about their relationship. The thing is, I think he's just into her, and because of her appearance. But honestly, he doesn't really like the Jews too much. It's just he was like, well, this one's cute. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of like, so he would only be into in the situation just to smooch and all that kind of nonsense. He'd just be into her for that. It wouldn't be that, what would happen eventually if she's like, oh, I'm let's get married. And he's like, oh, hey, gotta go. I mean, I don't think he's really serious. I don't think the assistant guy has a chance with her either. It's just kind of, there's lots of tragedy coming for these people. Okay. So do you want to get to the procedure?
Yes.
The summoning spell. You want to get into some you want to get some heavy metal D&D bonkers scene. This scene totally reminded me.
This has all the good special effects, probably.
Yeah.
So it starts out with he makes a circle, he waves around. So the Star of David, which is a peculiar shape, is very important in this story. So it's been shown in a shot over the golem, and he waves it around and stuff. Is like the key of Solomon is what's needed to use the spell. Yeah. So here's what they're doing. So if you don't know, there is a certain spirit that they are summoning because how on earth do we put a golem to life? Because we don't know how to do it. We don't know what to put on the scroll to put into this golem. So what they're doing is they're summoning Astaroth.
Yeah,
oh boy, it's Astaroth.
It's not Sephiroth, it's Astaroth.
Yeah. Imagine if Rabbi Lowe was in Kingdom Hearts, man.
Yeah, exactly. So Astaroth in demonology is the great Duke of Hell in the first hierarchy with Beelzebub and Lucifer. He's part of the evil trinity. But he's probably named after a Near Eastern goddess called Astarte, which actually is in the Bible. So there are some old occult grimoires or spell books that Astaroth's name is in. He's also connected to, he's associated with the Qliphoth, which are evil forces in Kabbalah or Kabbalistic beliefs. Kabbalah is a Jewish mysticism like side thing, so that's why this is connected to that. You mentioned the Key of Solomon. Well, supposedly Solomon in these legends, Solomon asked God for all the wisdom in the world, and God goes, okay. And some of that wisdom involved being able to summon spirits, angels, demons, whatever, and command them to do whatever you want them to do. And you would use this summoning circle along with the Star of David to do it.
So in this case, what they needed was the word of life. So what they do is he waves it around and he begs them, come here, Astaroth, and tell us the word. Tell us the word.
Oh, yeah.
And so then there's a big like fire all around, which, in my opinion, I don't know exactly how it was done, but I think it was probably there were pits where they could put the fire, and then they set fires in the pits to make it turn into a circle. But it probably wasn't that, because you couldn't see what was ignited with the fire. So what do you think?
Or I'm thinking the floor, maybe the floor was covered, those little parts in the circle, because I couldn't see where the circle was, and then all of a sudden I do. So maybe there was some stone over that. I don't know. All I know is it was
pretty cool.
It's pretty cool, because you're looking at it going, these are people that don't have a lot of money, and they're just using ingenuity and artistry to do this.
And after all, this is pretty cool. I mean, they thought that the stuff in 1902, Trip to the Moon, last episode, was pretty cool. This is a decade after that. This is 1920, man.
It's not as crazy, though. It's very subtle, though. Although, the face of, well, I guess, Astaroth with the smoke coming out, I was just watching that going, I was thinking of that he was vaping.
Okay, you're gonna have to cut that out. Cut this out.
I'm not gonna cut that out. He looked like he was vaping, like smoke was billowing from his mouth. So anyway, go ahead.
So then there's fireballs dangling from strings. Of course we can see it's strings, but it was pretty cool for the time. There are like fire bouncing around, fireballs. So then Astaroth comes out and he is a face. He's literally just a floating half head. That's his face. And so he comes over and he's like begging him, and then he finally whispers the name with like having it overlaid over the background is pretty cool. Pretty good effects. All
right, so are you gonna say what the word is, or is that just gonna curse the podcast?
It probably would curse the podcast. And then second of all, I don't know how I can pronounce it because it's literally just words that I don't know how to pronounce that word. There's like an R looking thing, but it's not an R. It's like half.
It's probably for the best. I think
it's for the best.
Because if you knew the magic word, I mean, and you just decided to do a little home experiment on that, who knows what you might bring to life? Yeah,
you could bring to life your chemistry class volcano and turn into a living being.
A volcano golem, or
golem.
What's that kinetic sand? Don't we have kinetic sand that your brother plays with some, or your sister plays with? Yeah, that a creature made out of kinetic sand. Oh, now we're getting into Marvel territory.
Yeah. So the golem finally awakens with his beautiful sculpted, as we've seen, beautifulness that is pretty cool. Like how they transitioned from an object to a human while still making it seem like an object and as stiff as you would think a golem is. So it's probably like a suit that he's wearing.
He's probably got a little bit of kind of making his chest more barrel shaped, and
his hair especially, his flat hair that's kind of shaped like Darth Vader. His cap.
It does look like a Darth Vader helmet. That's good.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, exactly. He's more machine now than man. So
you had something to say about his hair.
I was gonna say that it definitely looked like when you make a sandcastle and you shape it, and it's got it's his face is not shaped. Of course, it's got makeup on it, and he can do all the expressions and stuff. But the hair is kind of shaped as if it really was sculpted out of clay, and I think that it gives it this iconic image. When you think of the golem and you watch this, you're going to be like, okay, this is a classic creature.
Yeah.
Even though we only
this guy is in the minds of everyone to come.
Yeah, I think so. Also, he's got little risers on his feet, like his shoes have lifts on them, I guess is what you call them. And when I was watching, I was thinking of movies to come, like Frankenstein. Where Frankenstein's monster has the lifts in him to make him like walk. Boris Karloff has these lifts in his feet to make him walk taller, and that's just what I thought of. So anybody that watches this movie, if you've seen Frankenstein, the Universal monster movie,
which we're gonna do later.
Yes, we are, 100%. So anyway, that's just what I got from it. So so if you make a golem and he's supposed to protect everybody, I mean, do you just let your quote robot sit around and not do anything?
Yeah.
What does he do with the golem though?
So he puts him into the workforce. You know, the first thing you do with someone who's been put into the world, a brand new born child who is not like any other sort of human that you know, put him into the workforce.
And take him out to the grocery store and have him hold a list and hand it to the grocer.
Which is what happens in this next
what
scene. When chapter 3 begins, he goes off on an errand where he's walking around all of the streets. Everyone sees him and they're like, who's that? Or not really. They're like scared. Extremely scared and nervous.
They are creeped out because the guy has a very severe face.
And he's stiff. And his his wide-eyed face, kind of like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
He looks like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson had a really bad day.
If Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was Korean.
He's okay. Yeah, I guess so. So, but he always has this kind of scowl on his face, like with his
his wide eyes and his puckered up lip, his lower lip.
Yeah, exactly. But there's not. He has some limited range of emotions that he does, but they definitely show you. You definitely read from him.
He's a very interesting character.
Yeah.
So he's going grocery shopping, and he's walking down the stairs. All the children scatter because they're all all along the stairs, and so he's walking along. Christmas tree, have a happy holiday.
Yeah. Does he get a tree?
No.
Okay.
He cuts one. He cuts some logs at the beginning of the scene.
He does cut logs. And honestly, I was watching him going, I want a golem. I mean, when this comes time again, right now it's winter time, but when it comes time to cut grass again, I don't really like doing it. So it would be awesome to have a golem. Just have him go cut the grass, and then I would remove the amulet off his chest and put him in the garage.
Or you could literally push him along the floor, and he'd be the grass. He'd eat the grass. Just push him along the floor. So the golem comes home, and so they're testing out how good he is. So the assistant goes, "Hey, you see this fireplace in the middle of this living room area? It's a very cool house, very curvy door frames, pretty good set design." So he commands him to pull on the fanner. So there's like a dangling thing that has a wire on it. And so what it does is it fans the fire. So he commands him to do it, but he doesn't expect. He's a strong boy. So he is pulling it with so much force that he almost sets fire to the house. Foreshadowing. Again.
It is foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing. Then they have to stop him because he's fanning the fire too much.
Earlier on, do you remember when he was with the children, though?
Yeah.
Let's just say, him with children, that comes later, too. A callback to that, him with the children. Anyway, so he is a strong boy, and he almost burns the house down. There's some fire issues there. Okay, then what happens?
So what happens is then... So they're going to the festival that we mentioned earlier, the Festival of the Roses, that the king has invited him because his magic is really cool, and so he wants to be entertained by him at the Festival of Roses, the Rose Festival. So then he takes his golem, because the golem is a very interesting guy, of course, if you've met him. Okay. Then they're going to the festival. Meanwhile, the squire is bribing a guy on the other side of a door. For what reasons other than to let him out to see his beloved girlfriend? Because he'd otherwise not be able to go into there. So he's bribing him with lots of packages of money.
Right. So, but does it show what Rabbi Lowe? Do they cross cut in between those two things? Because Rabbi Lowe is
it's like interjected, which is very cool.
Okay.
How they can have multiple things going on in a story at the same time. Movies have progressed.
That's very common.
Yeah,
now.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So when what is Rabbi Lowe is at the Rose Festival.
So they arrive. Everyone is dancing. There are trumpeters trumpeting.
The people there are kind of creeped out, but interested at the golem. They're like. They're weirded out, but they think they're secretly intrigued by his appearance. And the emperor wants to see something supernatural.
So then, what happens after that was that it's very important for this show that he was about to perform. He was going to show them the Jews, like the old Jews, when they were in their prime time. But the condition was that you could not speak or laugh or make any noises at all, or else you will be cursed and something terrible will happen, which in this case was the famous scene of the ceiling falling down. So then you see superposed.
They're watching. I mean, if you thought he was just going to do a shadow puppet thing, he makes Netflix show up on the wall, man.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who watches this would be like, "You are amazing. How did you do that?"
Yeah. How did he do it? What do you think?
How the character did it? Magic. How he did it in the thing is they used film layered on top of itself, and which is something that George Méliès did back in even 1901. So this was a common thing that they could do, and it just was done very well. The thing that made everybody that react was, and I'm not fully understanding why. I guess it's just a thing of culture, but it's a character named Ahasuerus, the Wandering Jew. I know about the Wandering Jew, but I don't know why they would have the Wandering Jew in his history, because the Wandering Jew is a mystical figure. It's basically a Jewish person around the time of Jesus. He made fun of Jesus or something while Jesus was going toward the cross or something, and he was cursed to be immortal, so he would never die. So I don't understand why the Wandering Jew would be in the history of the Jews, because it's more I think it's more of an invention of non-Jewish people. I don't know why they laughed. I mean, he's a funny man. I guess they found something funny about him. So as the Jews are walking, the camels are going by. He appears. One guy goes, "Hey, that looks kind of funny." That made everyone laugh. And then the king laughs. Everyone laughs. And then the warranty is voided, and it appears that the wall is coming down, which is very interesting, effectually. Yes, and who else to come to the rescue but
the Golem,
his own personal superhero robot, Gigantor. I mean Golem. He comes right. he comes right in, and I mean, very Superman of him, Supermensch. He comes in and holds the roof up, and it's a very interesting shot. And basically, the emperor, in gratitude, he goes, I changed my mind. I pardon you guys. You're allowed to stay. Okay, then what happens?
Okay, so what next happens is that he holds up the roof in a very famous scene. Of course, we can't show it, but we can definitely talk about the plot, because that's what we're doing right now. We'll talk about the effects later in more detail. The shots and stuff.
Rabbi Lowe and the Golem go back, but this is already. Let's see. I'm not certain, but is Florian still at the house?
Yeah. So he went to the house and he snuck over to the house because he wanted to, and so they come back with the Golem, but then they see the Golem acting erratically. He's even more vicious than he was before, and so they're freaking out. They deactivate him. And then...
Well, they try to, don't they?
Well, they do. They do. And so it's because of Astaroth. You see, of course he still exists. And because of the stars being in the way that it is, that he could summon the Golem in the first place with the Solomon Key and with Astaroth, the Word of Life.
Well, Astaroth will take over and possess the Golem.
So that's what he's starting to do right now. And so he's not the way it was. Like, he's halfway... Astaroth, basically. They deactivate him because, of course, Astaroth is probably evil, and he's going to attack everyone, so he doesn't want to die.
Yeah.
He deactivates him, but then the assistant over here, he comes in, he sees them two, they're kissing, they're in the bed, and he's what the heck went on here?
No, before that, basically they're having a celebration down in the streets
because of the Festival of Roses.
Well, but not just that. They're celebrating the fact that the Jews are saved. They're like, yay, Rabbi Lowe saved us by going to see the king.
Yeah, and because he went to see the king went, you know what? Your magic is really great. You saved us from the palace falling on us, so we're going to not have you die. Yeah. So we're jumping around a lot here, but that's what happened.
Rabbi Lowe says to the assistant, hey, come down and join the celebration. He goes, I will. I'll just go get your daughter. And then he goes upstairs.
And then he sees them two kissing and flirting and stuff and whatever they did while they were gone.
He hears them. He hears them behind the door. And they're like, uh-oh, okay, I'll leave first and then you leave after me. You know, they're trying to find a way to cover this whole thing up.
And then he's really ticked off at this. And he goes over to the golem. He puts him back on and he goes and tells him to grab Florian and to move him out of the house forcibly.
He does.
However, this is not the golem here.
He moves him out of the top of the house, so he does.
He breaks down the door instead, takes him, runs him all the way up the stairs because Astaroth is Astaroth, and he does what other Astaroth does, and he throws him off the roof.
Yeah, and how does the assistant and Miriam take it? They think it's great, right? No, they're horrified.
Yeah.
They're absolutely horrified, and they try to run, and here comes the fire.
So the house is on fire because of all the ruin that the golem is causing, and he's walking around, he's destroying everything he could find. He's got Miriam taken by the hair. Must be really painful. As painful as it would be to drag him around and use him as to mow the lawn.
Yeah, it was exactly.
So he's taking it out on his creators, and he's captured Miriam. He's going around, and so Rabbi Lowe is gonna make a spell in order to remove Astaroth from the golem and deactivate him once and for all. So everyone in the temple that we heard of before, they're praying at it again because they see the golem, and the golem is scary, spooky, and they're like praying. And so he goes over to them and he interrupts them, and he tells them that the golem is there and that he's destroying everyone. And so everyone is heading out to go stop the golem. So they're all like really scared. They go over to Lowe and he's like, yeah, you need to stop this. And so he goes over and he performs the spell.
He performs the spell to stop the fire. He actually makes the fire go away, which this guy is just boss.
Yeah, and he removes Astaroth from the golem. You know, cliff notes here.
Well, the golem, he stops doing the destruction, and he leaves Miriam, and he goes toward the gate and breaks that sucker open, and then there's children.
And so he's walking out of the place because he has no purpose, and he dropped his captive and went away.
All the kids run away from him except for one that he picks up, which this does remind me of Frankenstein. Do you remember the scene?
The scene at the end, or near the end.
It's in the middle. There's a scene on Frankenstein where there's a little girl that this is partially that got censored out, I think, but he has a little girl, you know, she's saying, oh, I'm throwing the flowers into the river, and he's like, oh, I'll do that too. Oh, you're a pretty flower, little girl, bloink, and eats her into the river too.
And so she drowns.
Yeah, exactly. But in this one,
instead, he just, he's still there, he doesn't have Astaroth, he's just staring. So the girl instead takes out the amulet in order to inspect it, and so then he falls to the floor. All the children are coming to sit on him, because that's what you do to somebody who just fell on the floor, is sit on them. They're a couch.
He's a human couch now, or a clay couch. So, well, it kind of shows that he's an object now, if that makes sense to me.
He is an object. But unfortunately, he will be remembered in our hearts. This is the death of the golem. So then, Lowe goes to the person who isn't an object, who's Miriam, and she's been captured, she's unconscious, and so he wakes her up.
Yeah, he wakes her up, he takes her home, and it's kind of awkward because the assistant comes in and says, oh, the Jews are waiting by the gate to, give you big props and big ups for doing this whole saving the day. He goes, and the assistant goes to Miriam and goes, I'm never going to tell anybody about your little tete-a-tete, your forbidden affair with Florian, and will you forgive me for my act? And then the Jews get the golem, rejoice and pray, and they bring him back in, and Star of David.
The Star of David comes again.
Yeah.
And so that's end of the scene.
And the movie.
So that was Der Golem Cliff Notes version. So we talked about the entire plot awkwardly, and we just stood here and talked about the plot. The plot was really cool.
Yeah, that was fun. So
yeah. I guess we haven't really talked about a plot extensively before because, after all, this was when plots were getting extensive, first of all. Because, after all, the first thing we were watching was like 15 minutes long. Now this is like an hour 15
Yeah, this
long.
is fine. So, okay, how did people take it when it came out in 1920? Well, in Germany, it did really awesome.
Everyone was spooked. Everyone was like, this is the absolute bomb. Go watch
Yeah,
this.
well,
This
it's
is
sold out.
spooky. This has cool magic. This is unbelievable for the time. So, as fundamental as Trip to the Moon was, this was another fundamental one of the 1920s versus the 1900.
Oh, yeah, they're just get ready because there's a lot more movies in the 1920s that are very classic coming, and we'll go into those. So, okay, so the film sold out at the Berlin premiere on October 29th, 1920. It played to full theaters for 2 months straight. And there's some movies that came out that we know have done that in America. I think Titanic was doing like full theaters for weeks upon weeks. So once it came into New York City in 1921 at the Criterion Theater, it was packed houses. It was the longest running movie in the same theater that year. It ran for 16 consecutive weeks in the theater, okay? So even in the summer when it was really hot, people were in there watching it on a daily basis multiple times a day. So
because this was really popular, this was the best thing. You've got to totally see
nobody
this.
had ever seen anything like this before. The only other thing that they could compare it to was another movie that we're going to watch, probably the next one we will watch if you want to. It's Robert Vinay's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. So this one is it's chilling. It's been called chilling, visually dazzling, a story of the supernatural, classic of German expressionist cinema. Those are all some things that.
So this is not the episode we're doing right now. Of course, we're doing their Golem.
I'm talking about some of the future things we'll see. So we'll see some more things in the future, the next couple episodes that will be examples of German expressionism, which, a couple of them I had not seen in years, and I was very surprised at how well they hold up. So as far as the special effects, I don't have a lot of information as to how they did what they did, but it does, I think we kind of put the nail on the head that, it's kind of like maybe paper mache or sculpted, some kind of sculpted material for the hair, and the clothing is very just clay caked clothing, so it looks like it's made out of
But
clay.
the main thing that made this movie really cool was that there were actual shots now. As far as we know, this is one of the first that could have done this, because this is, of course, we didn't have this originally, but we've restored it, so there's a ton more that we probably haven't restored. We don't know as much as history as we would like, but there was all sorts of shots, wide shots, and there were window shots, which was also something becoming pretty famous. Like, there were shots of landscapes. There was one that there was a cat walking by, which was popularized by a certain man named...
What is it?
Jackie Chan.
A cat walking by.
But we'll watch those later. We're probably going to watch Jackie Chan. You want to watch Jackie Chan's podcast?
You know what? I would love to. There are some Jackie Chan movies that we could put in this. As an aside, I know that this podcast is really focused on science fiction and fantasy, but let me tell you, there's nothing more fantastical than the way Jackie Chan fights. Okay.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else that you would? What was your opinion of this? Just you had never seen anything like this before. You've mostly seen modern stuff. What did you really think about this movie?
I thought it was pretty revolutionary for its age. You've got the window shots. You've got all sorts of shots, cool shots, crowd shots, like everything. You've got bassoons.
Okay.
The Rose Fest had bassoons. That's pretty cool.
There was bassoons. What I thought of is here, the first two movies that we talked about had very static, non-moving, call it locked off shots. It was like we're doing a medium to a long shot, and that's all we're doing. And
they didn't move the camera at all because they didn't have the technology to do so. But now the camera is much more complex. It can move around. It could do a bunch of stuff. And
they could work on the sets more. The sets had to be less flat. I remember,
it was more curvy, especially Rabbi Lowe's house. It was pretty curvy door frames.
The thing they did about the sets is in German expressionism is they made them very strange angles. I mean, there's a lot of curves in this area here, but if you get to the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, you're going to notice a lot of those strange angles. This is making me want to watch this for our next episode.
Yeah.
So, anything else you want to mention before we go?
Not really, except for one thing, Astaroth. That's pretty funny.
Astaroth. Yeah, that's
Astaroth.
So, one thing we'll talk about real quick is you probably noticed that the first episode that we put out, the sound probably wasn't as good as we're doing here. We're getting better and better every time. I mean, I'm not an expert with podcasting. I just like movies, and I like talking to my son about movies. If you could pretty much take this whole podcast and say, well, what is it? Well, we both like movies, and we like talking to each other about movies, and we're father and son. I mean, that's pretty much, it sums up the reason why we're doing this. You know, we're doing the best we can with the sound.
But so far, it has definitely improved. Like, for our first episode, we were in one room with one mic. Now we're in 2 rooms with 2 mics, and we are communicating through Zoom is another thing we're doing, which is pretty cool.
That is a hint that I saw online is when you're doing podcasts, you can do it through Zoom, so you can be, separated a little bit.
And it's pretty handy. But also another thing is you hear more different background noises. Like, for instance, you probably hear me shift around in my chair
common.
a lot.
I've
That's
listened
pretty
to a lot
common.
of podcasts, and I hear some of that. I hear people opening cans of soda, and so it's not that big a deal. As long as they're not gulping it right into the mic, it's not a big deal. So.
Yeah, but nowadays we're doing it pretty free flow, and we're gonna figure out how to make it better over we do this, probably improve some things, and so far it's pretty great. I mean, we talked about plot for 30 minutes of just plot.
That was my favorite part because it really reminded me stuff about the movie, and it's almost like watching it again with you and figuring out what you saw in it. So, just to let everybody know that our listeners that we've got about 3 or 4 more episodes, probably in the 1920s. Some of those are going to be German expressionists. Some of those are going to be inspired by that.
So there's more to come. Make sure to watch those. And also watch our first episode to see where we started and what we're all about.
Make sure you're subscribed so you get notifications when we have new episodes.
Give us 5 stars or
on
3
iTunes,
stars.
Yeah. On iTunes, give us 4 or 5 stars. Give us a quick little review. If we do read those, we might actually read some of those if they're decent. We might read some of those on future episodes, kind of.
And we're also going to have a website too, so that's going to be pretty cool. So go check that out when we have it up.
We'll announce future episodes on the website. We'll also do that via Twitter. Just stay tuned for all that information on that.
If you want us to have an Instagram, make sure to say so. We might also do Instagram if that's possible. I mean, just post pictures of us and saying we're starting a podcast now. We just put it up. It's cool.
Yeah,
so every day it's the same picture.
What would we actually put on Instagram? I mean, I honestly have no idea what to put on Instagram, but
you'd have to tell us. Tell us what you like.
Yeah, tell us what you like on the website. Email us at our email address. So if you stay tuned to the end of the episode, we'll kind of give you some of our addresses for our different social media sites and things like that. So with that,
goodbye.
Let's say Auf Wiedersehen. You want to do like in German? Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
That's really lame German. But okay. Bye everybody.
But we're lame, so who knows? Bye everybody.
Don't forget to open your third eye and telepathically message us at cinefanpod@gmail.com. Set your chronoscope dial to the future setting and peruse cinematicfanpodcast.wordpress.com. Hunker over your ham radio as your keen ears listen for the ghostly voices tweeting on our Twitter at CinematicFanta1. Exchange all of your money into Republic credits and donate at our Patreon page at patreon.com/cinefanpodcast. Ending transmission now.